Ready? Hello everyone, welcome to the third session of AmProud's PrideFest 2020. Today we're joined by one of our clients who is both an active ally and committed to diverse representation in the advertising industry. The Co-op has long supported LGBTQ+ causes through their community fund. We're the only retailer to back equal marriage in the Houses of Parliament and have supported Pride events in the UK for over a decade. Cara has worked with the Co-op since January last year and partnered with this iconic retailer on their Pride 2019 campaign. My name is Lee Mabey, AmProud co-chair, and I have the honour of moderating this discussion. It is my pleasure to welcome Lindsay Laycock and Sam Walker from the Co-op. Hello both.
Afternoon.
Hi.
Good to have you on board. Channel 4 revealed in their Mirror in the Industry insight that 60% of LGBTQ+ people have seen their group negatively represented in TV ads, while Gay Times recently revealed that 72% believe that their representation in advertising is tokenistic. Navigating the waters between authenticity and virtue signalling is difficult, but get it right and you will have vocal advocates. Other Vox revealed that queer consumers are over twice as likely to buy from brands that they trust, as well as being more likely to talk about positive brand experiences both in person and on social media. Over the next 45 minutes, you'll get to hear how the Co-op has demonstrated its support of LGBTQ+ customers and discover how we can adopt these learnings with our clients. Now, a bit of housekeeping. We'll be sharing this video on YouTube after the session, and it is being recorded live. And there is also a live Q&A. So please do enter your questions and any questions you have for our guests, and we'll answer those at the end of the session. Now, I'm going to let our two guests introduce themselves. Over to you.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Laycock. I'm Senior Campaign Lead working at Co-op. We've worked at Co-op for 10 years now across different parts of the business and more latterly in kind of food and community and membership marketing.
Hi, I'm Sam Walker. I look after the campaign team at Co-op and work with Lindsay and the team. I've been there 5 years, so definitely a newcomer compared to Lindsay's 10 we just celebrated. Really good to be here talking with you today.
Thank you both. So kicking off, why have the Co-op been such a long-time supporter of LGBTQ+ employees and customers?
I think I'll kind of start on this one. I think it comes down to being really true to our values. So the Co-op has been an inclusive organisation for a really long time. It's got a democratic structure. It's really different to a typical business. And I think for us, it's not been about a marketing thing. It's something that is driven by our values. We've got a whole series of behavioural values that we hold true in the organisation. One of those is endless inclusion, and that's a really important one for us to make sure we're thinking inclusively across all groups, so that we're really reflecting the communities we serve. And I think some of the things that we've been involved in over that time it is definitely more than marketing. So we've got a big respect network who we involve. We've got over 1,000 colleagues involved across the organisation, which gets a lot of profile and support. We've been really big on campaigning as well. Things like, I think you mentioned earlier, the Equal Marriage Bill. We're kind of we're very active in that space, and it's about campaigning for change. And we've got local groups we support through our local community fund. We've got academies, and then actually it then comes to life through our marketing and comms. But actually, I think the reason it's been something we've supported for a long time is because it's driven by those values, rather than being something that we've kind of come to lately. It's hopefully something that we've been able to support for a period of time. And then I think if you look at some of the kind of more recent work that's been happening, if you look at the academies that we've worked with, we've helped run an academy trust with dozens of schools under that umbrella. It's something where we've actually looked at where's the opportunity to support more broadly, and you've got real connections in those academies with things being taught and supported there, as well as particularly through the local community fund, where we've got a number of local causes which we've highlighted through some of our recent marketing campaigns. And I think because it's grounded in those values, it's something that comes to life in lots of places in business. It's not a marketing thing or something that just comes to life once a year through Pride. It's something that actually has been supported in a a more grounded way over a period of time. And I think it comes from that value of inclusion in the organisation.
Fantastic. And could you both provide me some information in terms of the journey that you've been on to increase the visibility of our community in advertising?
Yeah, I think that's where I kind of didn't major on the marketing a bit before. I think it's something that we've looked at in a couple of levels, and I've been here for 5 years, and certainly it's something over that time. It's something that's become more front of mind for us. I think particularly where we are doing very big, broad reach bits of communication, there's a real opportunity for us to represent all the communities we serve. And we've definitely thought about that in our casting. So whilst we don't necessarily kind of go into a particular ad saying that we want to represent this particular group or that particular group, a standing part of our brief on casting and how we represent people in communication is to make sure it is diverse and it does represent all the communities we serve. So whether that's the LGBT community, whether it's different ethnic backgrounds, whether it's we've had disabilities represented as well. Actually, what we try and do is focus in on representing in a really broad way all of those communities and probably over-representing slightly so that we're living up to that value of inclusion. And I think over the last 3-4 years ago, we started to do a bit more of that through our casting, and then I think over the last year we've probably started to do more. I think Lindsay got a couple of good examples to bring that to life.
Yeah, I mean, if you take us back to last summer, so summer 2019, we ran a campaign there which kind of shone a light on the local community fund, which is the local causes that we fund across the UK from our membership scheme. And last summer we went out and went out to show the UK really how those local causes benefited from that funding. And one of the causes that we chose to shine a light on was Liverpool City Region Pride Foundation. We didn't every cause we chose was different in every community. What we wanted to show was the breadth and diversity of the causes that were receiving the funding from us, and Liverpool City Region Pride was one of them. And in the ad, we featured a lady who'd received support from Liverpool City Region Pride Foundation. She'd benefited directly from the charity. So it feels really natural for us because we're using examples of causes that benefit from our support, and some of those causes are LGBT causes, some support disabled people, some support food poverty. So it felt a real natural journey for us to include that as one of our adverts. And we got some great kind of feedback on that as well. We got some challenging feedback, certainly on social media, but we also got some fantastic feedback as well. Another example from the early part of this year it's using a gay couple in our pizza and plastics ad, which we ran in Q1. But again, we don't overtly kind of go out to cast specific groups within our ads. It feels like it's a very natural journey to be representative of the communities and the customers and members we serve. So it's quite a natural journey that we've been on in terms of casting.
So the other thing that has been a bit different for us over the last year is how we've then had some of those conversations in social media, particularly. So I think previously what we've done is we through casting and through other things, we've looked to represent people more so that we're putting forward that more diverse face. But what we decided to do last year, when we ran our ad with the lady who benefited from one of our causes, we came to that expecting that there would be some low level of reaction to it, and we geared up our social media team to respond to that in a really different way. So rather than putting out a kind of standard statement or trying to get defensive, actually we let them be really authentic in their response and engage with things. So Lindsay and I were having a look back over some of the examples before coming on this, and there's a few absolute crackers in there that we should send around and share. That I think from on one level, from a brand point of view, had you been doing that a few years ago, you would have felt uncomfortable putting the brand into what's essentially quite a confrontational space. But what was amazing from it was, because we took a really clear stand on it, and we were really clear about why we fronting, why we supported different groups, and why we were kind of increasing the prominence. Actually, it then gave us the confidence to have a much more robust response in social to really call out where people were being prejudiced or saying things that didn't reflect the values that are important to us. And that in turn got a lot of recognition, and we had one or two of the social media team developed a little bit of a following through that time. But I think that was a great example of where by doing the right thing and sticking to your guns and being what, from a brand point of view, certainly a few years ago would have felt relatively brave, actually it's definitely rewarded and really feels like the right thing to do.
So on that, was there, just want to expand that a little bit more, Sam. So was it a blend of people accusing you of virtue signaling, or was it people that were vitriolic towards the representations you're putting in there? What was the split between those, and how did your teams react to those different types of scenarios?
There was a little bit of both. I think it was where there was some kind of vitriolic response. That was the bit that we'd really focused on, because we've gone out with hopefully a really positive, inclusive depiction, and you've got people who are responding to that in a negative way with prejudice, and effectively challenging the values that we've tried to espouse by putting it there. And it was in those exchanges that actually we allowed the social media team to have a lot more freedom in how they chose to respond. And some of that was they would gently kind of hold the mirror up to what someone had said. Some of that was actually much punchier, and really challenged head on some of the things that people were saying. But what we found was that the bolder the response was, as long as it wasn't overtly rude or inappropriate, but as long as we were being really clear and holding sticking to our guns and holding true to those principles, what happened was people rallied around some of those responses in social media. And you suddenly found that what started out as responding to one negative comment turned into a really positive conversation of support. And I think for us that was something we really were keen to keep replicating. We've given the social media team that bit more freedom ongoing in responding to those kind of things, because it lived up to our values, but actually it does also give you a really good way of engaging with a wider community in social media.
Excellent. So you touched on, Lindsay, the work you did last year. I'd love to know a bit more about what you did for Pride 2019.
I'll pass back to Sam for that, because that was more in his summer campaign rather than mine.
In addition to the team, so we did quite a lot of Pride support last year. We got behind about 10 of the big events, and for the bit I was talking about before, lots of our colleagues are involved, and it's not just the colleagues that the teams from your side would interact with. We've got 70,000 colleagues up and down the country working in our stores. And what's really encouraging is you've got a few of our retail leaders who are really vocal, supporters of Pride and inclusion, and they really galvanise colleagues around it. So we had lots of activity going on just through our colleagues and our Respect network actually supporting some of those events. Well, then when it came to, you also had the internal bit with events and things happening through internal comms and within the offices as well. But then from a marketing point of view, we got behind about 10 of the events. We ran sort of mini localized campaigns where we were doing a few things. We were supporting and helping people celebrate the event, and obviously highlighting where we've got stores nearby that would be relevant to them. We had a couple of specific products that were designed to support last year, but we were also then pulling out through some of the channels we were doing some of that history of campaigning, to really I think tell that longer story, rather than have it just as we're here in the moment, we'd like to sell something, which is absolutely not what our support for Pride has been about. It's a bit, it's that deeper running, longer term piece. And actually we focus the marketing across all of those things. And then the one of the fun bits we don't do very often, we actually properly dressed some of our lorries and our fleet, and had them kind of touring the country quite prominently as well. So it was a really kind of good, fun bit of campaigning, but actually was very much grounded in some of those more serious campaigning moments as well that we've had. And I think the challenge we've had then obviously coming into 2020 is there's not quite so much activity going on because we're all in our homes on Zoom. But I think what that's meant is everyone's focused their efforts very much into what is still possible to do, rather than kind of being a bit defeatist. And Lindsay and I were talking earlier, we've got a whole series of webinars happening internally. There's a whole load of activity to do a bit of education and share ways to be inclusive across all of our teams, because it's an ongoing focus. We want to help people know how to do that really effectively. And then I think the other thing is we are continuing to talk about some of those campaigning moments, reminding people that it's not just a recent thing that's come about. Actually, this has been going on for a while, and there've been some really big moments where support's been needed. So I think it will definitely not feel as high profile from a media point of view, maybe it has done in previous years, but actually I think internally, if anything, it feels bigger, We've all had, ways for as leaders of your teams to support your team, get engaged with your team, and have a bit of fun along the way. But it's very much that internal focus for 2020 rather than purely external, where it's probably been more focused before.
And I do remember last year with some of the feedback on social, one of the really nice things was customers saying the accusations of virtue signaling. Customers were saying, well, no, they've been supporting local communities. We're actually coming back and giving examples. There seems to be a lot of loyalty. How are you touched on the fact that you've got 70,000 employees across the UK, across 2,500 stores for food alone. How are you looking to, how do you engage them and let them know about the causes that you're doing from internal and external?
So we've got a series of, I guess there's a few, but there's some internal comms channels that reach into stores as well, where we're able to share lots of the updates. But actually a lot of it happens through the retail teams, because there's regional teams up and down the country, and they're the ones who are often the most vocal and passionate about doing some of these things on the ground. So it'll be absolutely a combination of the two. I think the opportunity to get involved in the same way in the stores as last year won't be there, because we're doing social distancing, and obviously you've got to manage those things very differently. But certainly through, yes, the internal comms channels, but also those key leadership teams locally who are championing it, pushing it. It's really important. To give you an example, some of our stores in the south, the managing director of the stores in the south is one of the big champions internally. He produces a weekly update that goes out to the team where he's celebrating things that are going on. He's encouraging them to get involved. And I know that he'll be there alongside some of the other retail leaders, really pushing for ways that people can still get involved, whilst obviously still respecting all the restrictions that we're all living with.
Brilliant. Now, you've obviously been doing a lot of work in this space for a long while now, and are arguably ahead of a fair few clients looking to engage with and include LGBT people in their comms. How are you? What have you learned along the way in terms of engaging the community?
I mean, I don't think certainly I'm not an expert in it and wouldn't profess to be. I think the biggest learning, certainly it feels like in the last 12 months, is that there is always a danger that people will react negatively to what you do in this space. And I think you need to be prepared to respond to that, but also be brave about it. And I think the biggest thing, certainly for us in the last 12 months, has been the fact that we've empowered the social teams to have those one-to-one conversations with individuals and be braver about their response. So I think that's probably the biggest learning for us. We've obviously got an LGBT kind of group within the business that we use quite a lot to bounce ideas off and to share things with. But I would say the biggest learning for us is certainly around the social media space and giving the people the empowerment and freedom to respond to some of those negative comments. I think that's huge, and I think that will get bigger for us in lots of other areas as well.
And I think that authenticity point's a really good one. So we touched on it a bit before. We've actually not done any products in kind of Pride rainbow packaging this year, because I think it does attract those questions about pink washing, and because it feels really overtly commercial in something which actually is not grounded in being a commercial event. So I think there's definitely something that we've learned around how to do it in an authentic way that feels, ultimately we are in a communications team. We want to communicate some of these things and to reach lots of people with it, but actually to convey that it's grounded in something deeper than we just want to sell Pride sandwich or sell something that's, to take advantage of that very topical thing. It feels like it's an opportunity to do something that's a bit more permanent and communicate it in that way, rather than have it feel like something which is opportunistic. And we've seen brands, I think, which have fallen foul of that. And we're always mindful of how things move on, and where, there's definitely I feel on our behalf a responsibility as a brand to be making a contribution and representing communities more, and helping set some of the context for where some of these conversations happen. But I think it is really important to do that in a way that feels right and credible for your brand and your business, because otherwise it does come across as insincere, and actually that can undermine all of the good intent behind everything you're trying to do.
Just want to come back to something that you were saying, Lindsay. It's really interesting actually around the fact that you've been using your LGBT network for some of the comms. Do you feel that's something that other organisations should be doing, rather than having it as an internal system to actually get them to advise on what you might do from a comms perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I've done that more in a couple of previous roles in the business, when I was in funeral care and also when I was in the brand marketing team. I think that why would you not? Because they can help you shape and think about it, and come up with different ideas and challenge your thinking. So I've always used them as a bit of a sounding board, if I'm honest, to help me kind of think things through, but also to make sure that I get it right. And some of those people work alongside us every day, that are part of that group, and other people work in different areas of the business. But I think it's fundamental to get their support and help guide you a little bit as well.
Yeah. So do you see LGBTQ plus representation as a point of difference for your brand because others aren't doing it? You know, do you feel it does set you apart from everyone else?
I think I wouldn't say I see it as a point of difference in and of itself. I think that the point of difference is that we're inclusive, and I think what I wouldn't want us to do is to feel like we were being tokenistic or doing something specifically because it set us apart. I think we do it because it's the right thing to do and because it's true to who we are, rather than us have it front and center as this is our one differentiator. I think, you know, having said that, I think it is something that, you know, we've been doing more of. We do want to do more of. I would love it if people recognize it as something that we do, but I would say it's it's driven by that focus on inclusion and that kind of campaigning ethos that runs through the business to make positive social change, rather than picking on it and going, that's a kind of, we're going to use that as a differentiator in marketing that hits a certain objective. I think it's more authentic and kind of deeper running than that.
Now, we've mentioned the word a few times during the session. We currently live in an age of authenticity, and we can all think of examples. Sam, you touched on a couple where people have accused brands of jumping on the bandwagon, and accused of rainbow or pink washing. What do you say to those who might be wary of engaging with or including LGBTQ plus people in their brand communications?
I think it's a really interesting question. I would be quite challenging a bit. I think everything we've seen the last few years has been, the most successful brands are ones which are finding an authentic purpose in their voice. In a way, that's one of the bits of COG which is easy because we've got that grounded. But lots of brands are heading into that space, and I think if that inclusion is not something that's part of your purpose, I would almost challenge brands to be looking at their purpose and say, does it feel like it's the right thing for 2020? It definitely feels like it's something important to do, and I think I would just be quite challenging of brands that were being really wary of it. I think our experience has over the last year certainly has shown that yes, if you are moving very visibly into being supportive, you will get some comments, but actually if you engage with them properly and you're really confident of what you're trying to achieve and your purpose and what your values are driving you to do, actually you can end up as a brand in a place that's better than the place you started, by dealing with those in the right way and engaging with it rather than burying your head in the sand and not being part of the solution. Would you say anything else to that, Lindsay?
No, I think it is about feeling kind of making sure that when you kind of enter into that space, have the kind of courage of your convictions and understand why you're doing it in the first place, and kind of stick to that, because I feel like being authentic, probably for us, we've got that heritage of campaigning for a long time, so we can go back and talk about what we've done in that space that helps us be kind of more authentic. But I think for other brands, start to kind of think that through and what is your purpose and why you're doing it, and make sure that you're fully prepared for the response that you might get, rather than kind of, I suppose, wedging out there and doing it because you think you should because everybody else is doing it.
Or even worse, to make a quick buck, because I think we've all seen examples of products that suddenly have been redressed for a short part of the year, and actually you see them and it does great a bit if you know that brand hasn't done anything to support the rest of the year, and it's suddenly like it's a really temporary thing, and I think people across all communities, I think you can spot that mile off. And I think it's something that hopefully brands will we'll learn from and we'll see a bit less of.
So just to expand on that, Sam, do you feel brands should say nothing, or do you feel that they should do these, do these token gestures once a month? What way would you sway on that?
I think if you're, my personal view would be, if you're a brand, you've got visibility, you've got a platform, you're helping create some of the context in which we all live. I think it's going to be different for all brands. All brands have got a different start point. They've got different brand challenges. They've got different heritage. So there's never going to be a one size fits all approach. But I think as a responsible brand, it's something that you should have a point of view on, and that may be bigger or smaller in communication. So I definitely don't think it's something that brands should be silent on. I just think when they support it, it shouldn't be in a tokenistic way. I think it would be, rather than having something once a year, I think actually it's about having some grassroots underlying activity, which all brands can do stuff within their own colleagues, within their own networks. All brands will serve a certain audience and community, and there's ongoing opportunities in all of those without it necessarily being a campaign message in and of itself. And I think if all brands were doing that, it would feel like we're living in quite a different place.
And who do you think should be raising this? Is this something that should be the job of the creatives, or should it be the media team bringing it to the clients, or should the clients just be demanding it of their creatives and media teams?
I think it's something for everybody. I don't think it's something you can delegate and say this is the responsibility of this team, or you're creative, it's your job to come up with it. I think for me, it just comes back down to how you manage a brand and how you would build out a marketing strategy, which would be you would always ground it in insight and your audience and your customer and the mood of the nation. And I think if you were doing that at each stage of the process, whether that's a planner, whether it's a creative, whether it's client side, whether it's agency side, I think it's something that would be part of the conversation. So I think it has to happen at all stages. I don't think it's something to delegate responsibility to one job title or one part of the process.
I agree. I think, especially from a creative perspective, I think when we talked about it, it's been quite a natural journey we've been on with certain casting for our TV ads. I think we almost don't have a discussion about it with creatives. It's almost just when we're doing the casting for a TV ad, it becomes as part and parcel of that casting, and it feels really natural. It doesn't feel like it's forced or by request. It feels that that's just representative of the communities that we serve.
So just to expand on that a little bit more, Lindsay, do you, if a brand's never included LGBTQ plus people in their brand communications before, should they just do it and make it seem natural, or should they announce it? So when they have been included, should they announce it, or just allow it to naturally become part of the conversation?
I mean, I suppose it's different for every single brand, but I wouldn't probably announce it. If this is a personal view, I would let it become part of your natural conversation. I think if that makes up your audience and your market, then that's a true representation of your your target audience. I don't think it needs to be announced.
Cool. I think over time it just becomes something that's not. I mean, if I'm honest, for the last 18 months, apart from where we've kind of we ran our strawberries ad last year that had the lady in that Lindsay talked about. It's not a particularly active topic of conversation because it's something that we're just used to doing, and we expect to see a diverse cast of people. And occasionally, if you wouldn't ever start and have a particular communication go, right, I want this group of people, this group of people, this group of people. But I think what you would be doing, we'd normally be casting a few at the same time. If you didn't have any group represented, I think you would be calling it out. But because we've got into that rhythm, because it's something that is whether someone's a planner, an account manager, or creative, actually everyone is just expecting that it's now part of what we do, and then it becomes a really natural thing. So I think to Lindsay's point, there might be brands where it would be something that they would want to signal more overtly. I think it comes to an extent. I think it comes down to the brand and the history of that brand and the way they're positioned and what level of support they've given over time. But I think it would be a great place if all brands were just doing it and just getting on with it. And hopefully that's where we've started to get to. There's definitely always more to do, but certainly feels a natural part of our process now.
So I'm going to throw out to the floor now and see if we get any questions come through. Before then, one final question I want to ask of yourselves. We're going to have planners on the line who might be wary about taking ideas to clients. What do you say to those planners who are potentially wary of taking an idea in terms of engaging the LGBTQ+ community to their clients?
I would say don't be wary, because it's part of the audience you're trying to attract. It's inclusive. So I would say don't be wary, because I think why would you not, if they're part of your target audience? Effectively, then you'd be saying, let's not target those people. So I think it's just a natural, that's something that would come naturally to any planner, to be honest.
And I think that the build I'd have on that is it would be an interesting, if it's something that hasn't been done before, it would be an interesting conversation to open up with the client, to start talking about how do they see their brand representing diversity, because then actually you're opening up that conversation in a really open way. But to Lindsay's point, I would absolutely not hold back from presenting things like that, because it should absolutely be part of the bread and butter. And definitely if a brand or a client's not considering that or thinking about it or doing anything in that space, actually that's where someone from an agency can really help them.
Brilliant. So we're just going to wait for some more questions to come through from the team before we go on. What are your views on brands that were active last year in 2019 around Pride, and then this year have gone quiet? Obviously, you've got lots of work still going on. What do you say to those brands that have decided that they're going to pull out this year because there is no physical event to support?
I think that's a really interesting one, because you've got two things. You've kind of got the difference in what's happening for Pride, but you've also got the whole COVID thing and the way brands have responded to that. It's the mashup of those two big changes, isn't it? I think it almost comes down to what were people engaging in Pride for in the first place? Because actually, if people were engaging just to raise profile for that short period of time, or to have a very commercial objective, then that would be why you think they might have gone quiet. If people and brands were engaging with it because it was more ingrained in what they're about, then you would expect that they're still doing stuff. I think just because we're not all able to get together and crowd together in the same place doesn't mean that as a brand there isn't a role for you to play, but just in a different way.
Was there anything for you to expand on there, Lindsay?
No, I think this, Sam's point is actually right. I think if you were only doing it in the first place because it wasn't ingrained in who you were as a business, then I suppose that's questionable. But I think, yeah, the same as Sam, really. There'll probably be an awful lot going on locally as well that people don't see from different brands. In stores, will they still support kind of what would have been Pride in Brighton? And I think they will. At a local level. So I think there is still a lot that we probably don't see from different brands and businesses that will still happen at a local level.
And I think that evolving support's an important one, because had we, in fact, we never developed final marketing plans around 2020 because we all knew that things were likely not to happen, sadly. We'd already made some changes to last year, thinking about coming to this year. So, for example, there are no products which have been dressed or had the packaging change for Pride, because actually it felt like that points more towards some of the temporary support rather than the ongoing, more grounded support. So I think it does come back to what was the brand getting involved for in the first place, and outside of there'll be some brands which had very hyper local things to each of the parades that would have happened. I think actually there's a you would definitely hope that lots of brands are still going to be really active.
We've had a few questions come through. So the first one, What mistakes have you made that's given you great learnings for your journey?
That's a great question. I have actually got a really good one for that. So when we were planning our summer campaign last year, when we were talking about different causes, we knew that in the causes we talked about, we did actively want to represent diversity. And we were looking through all the causes we support to find the causes with the best story to tell. And there's a few bits you have to consider with that. So, all of the causes, I think we'd be really proud to work with because they do amazing things. But some of those stories are easier to tell in 30 seconds than some others. And I think when we got down to our short list of different causes, and we had a few LGBTQ plus causes that we support that we were speaking to, we definitely had a challenge of finding people who were happy to be on camera or to talk really openly about their story. And some of the causes we support were particularly dealing with young people. So there was a real learning for us early on actually how to engage with people to find the stories they're really comfortable to tell, versus the ones where actually it's not necessarily the right thing to put front and center, even though that support's really key. So definitely a learning for us when we're particularly when we're doing the sort of production process and how to work with people to find their best stories. And as it turned out, the lady we worked with on the ad was absolutely brilliant. She was so passionate. She was such an advocate. She probably pushed all of the stuff we were doing almost as much as we did locally, and was a huge, really enthusiastic and amazing participant. But I think there was definitely a learning for us on how do you. There's probably an extra level of consideration you need to have, particularly when you're dealing with causes for young people, in order to get to the right stories you want to tell. That's probably the biggest one for me.
Yeah, totally. There's lots of legwork to be done, I think, when we're using local causes, and getting that authenticity into our ads, and not just from last summer's campaign, Sam, from a few across the year. Last year, I think doing that legwork about who the causes are, and the backstories and whether they're suitable for filming and even wish to be filmed is imperative, and it takes quite a lot of time. But doing that is definitely how you make it more successful.
And we're never very patient, so we always try and do it really quickly.
Yeah, we do.
You definitely need to be a bit more considered and patient.
We've learned a lot along the way.
It's great. I think a lot of people can relate to that and take some of those learnings on board. Great question here from Charlotte. How do you measure the success of Pride campaigns?
That is a great question. So I think we would measure it in a couple of ways. So when we've looked at the Pride campaigns, what we don't have in there is a big hard commercial objective. It's much more about engagement, and it's about telling the story of the things we've done historically and the values that underpin it. And it's about bringing people together and engaging them in that moment. Yes, associating the brand with it and helping people to celebrate. So when it comes to the measurement piece, the kind of things we'd look at are, we wouldn't be looking at sales metrics for it, but we would absolutely be looking for, social engagement would be a really big one. How people engage with the content that we've put out there, how many people have participated when we've run events on the ground in communities. And then we'd also be looking at things like how easy was it for our colleagues to engage with. And one of the big things that the social team have done brilliantly over the last year, 18 months, is worked out how to build a platform so that when we've got events, activities, communication happening, our colleagues up and down the country can use that, post about it using our assets, but put it in their voice and be really authentic. So we'd absolutely be looking for how far have local colleagues engaged with it, because that's a great measure of how relevant was it and how much do people feel passionate enough about it to go and engage with in their community. So those are the kind of, it would definitely be those measures rather than the harder sales measures we'll be looking at.
Cool. We've had another question come through from Andrew. Do you have one section of the business dedicated to D&I, or is it separated? And if it is separated, how do you communicate effectively to ensure representation is seen across the board?
Do you want to take that one, Lindsay?
Oh, I'm going to let you take that one, Sam.
So say it again, Lee.
Do you have one section of the business dedicated to D&I, or is it separated? And if it is separated, how do they communicate with each other to ensure the representation is seen across the board?
Sorry, D&I being?
Diversity and inclusion.
Oh, sorry, diversity and inclusion. So we have, there isn't one section of the business dedicated to it. I think the way that we, so there's various places that it happens within the business. So from a colleague point of view, it is managed within the people function in the team, and it's definitely something that they would look at. From a marketing point of view, as Lindsay talked about, it's something that we would drive within our teams, but also working very clearly with the Respect Network. And then the Respect Network actually have quite a big voice in the organisation. So they're at the moment in the middle of doing their 3-year strategy and working out what support they want to ask for from the business. So it's not something that we would kind of centralise and say that's one person's job to do. That there's different activities happening in different places, and at the same time, one of the big things that's going on at the moment with some of the internal comms I was talking about earlier is we're making it something that everybody has a responsibility for, and it's running across that whole spectrum of representation at different levels of the organisation, through to recruitment processes, through to inclusion events, and right through into comms and marketing. But it doesn't sit in one place. It's something that we're trying to make part of what everybody does.
And one final question, which other brands do you think is effectively including LGBTQ plus people in their ads?
That's a great question. I'm going to struggle to give you an example now.
I mean, there's been some recent stuff, hasn't there, from different brands like Diesel. I couldn't name one off the top of my head that I think there's lots of brands doing it, but not one that jumps to mind that does it more than the rest.
I think.
What about you, Sam?
Yeah, no, I'd kind of agree.
We've had another question come through from Steve. As a customer-focused business, how do you manage the tension when some customers probably don't always share the same sense of inclusion as the business? So obviously you mentioned social, but do you get people writing to you as well, or how do you deal with that?
I don't think we get a huge amount of that. So I think social is probably the place that we see and hear the most of it. It's certainly not something which I think surfaces in a big way outside of that. I think it is in social, and it is responded in the ways that we talked about, which is definitely evolved, but by being a bit braver than we used to be, I think that's definitely been our way of approaching it, and I think that's, given the way that's gone down and been responded to, I think that would be our way of responding in any channel or area that we've got any comments or criticism. But certainly it's not something that we see or hear a vast amount of, thankfully.
Fantastic. Well, I just want to say thank you to both for a really enlightening session. I've certainly learned a lot more about the co-op business over the last 45 minutes. Just want to say to those who are watching, please do join us for our next 2 sessions, our final 2 sessions of PrideFest. We have a session on the buy experience tomorrow at 12:30, and then we have an extra special drag queen quiz at 4 p.m. tomorrow in association with Hearst. That is hosted by the powerhouse as Tea and Coffee. And also, please do make sure that you do join our raffle and support 3 brilliant causes: the Albert Kennedy Trust, the George House Trust, and also Opening Doors London. The link for those can be found in the invite for this event. That leaves it for me to wrap up and say thank you once again to Lindsay and to Sam for joining us today, and to everyone else, please do take care.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone, bye-bye.